So in the Diablo Force team recent upload to the Diablo main channel, we got a sneak peek at a feature that honestly, I did not think was going to be added to the game, and that is the skip campaign feature. I want to talk about some of the conversation going on around Twitter with Adam Fletcher and the confirmation on how this is going to work, because this is a massive feature that is going to drastically change the future and the replayability across multiple classes for every single person in the game. Not only that, but we also have some talk about how kind of the mentality of the balance team around classes is going to work. Let's dive into it. So let's talk about this, guys. I am super excited about this. As I mentioned, I did not think this was going to be added to the game, but this is an insane feature. Okay, so as you can see here, this comes from the Inside the Game Your Class Your Way video, which I do have some thoughts on that, but that's not what today's video is about. You can see on the left-hand side, these people have level 50, level 75 characters. For those of you that don't know, in order to unlock the World Tier 3 and World Tier 4, you must first beat the campaign, which means at level 50 roughly you're going to be able to beat the campaign. Now they mentioned that the totality of reaching the end of the season journey is roughly 80 hours, I believe, and the totality of reaching level 100 is 150 hours. So assuming, which this is not true, you just cut that in half, plus a little bit less because the early levels are usually easier, you can expect to take about 50 to 60 hours to beat the campaign. After you beat the campaign, this button will appear on the right hand side, skip campaign. This is insane. Now, you might be asking how I know this stuff. We're going to dive into some of the proof here, but I want to talk a little bit about the implications of this. So why is this important? What does this matter? Well, for those of you that played Diablo 3, one of the reasons that a lot of people skipped the game early on into the career of Diablo 3 was that there was no way to get out of the campaign, right? That was the whole game. When they added the adventure mode, that's when the game really started to streamline, and seasons, etc. That's because people could just do whatever they wanted, and this skip campaign feature absolutely does that. Okay, you can load up a new character, maybe move some gear over, immediately access the World Tier 3 and World Tier 4 if necessary, earlier than you might have otherwise without beating the campaign. This really helps out, especially those players that want to make multiple classes. This is going to be insanely helpful, and what someone said that I want to go over a little bit later, and I completely agree with, is not waste our time. So I want to talk about how I know some of this information. The first thing I want to pull up is Adam Fletcher's response, or Pez Radar. He says, Dawn provides some additional info here, and it mentions this feature becomes available for your account after beating the campaign the first time, or once. The question I have is whether or not this is going to transition between seasons. I imagine that it will not, because each seasonal character, usually the way Diablo works is you have your main character, which is outside of seasons, you can play it at any time. Then you have your seasonal characters, and then you have your hardcore characters, and then you have your seasonal hardcore characters, okay? And each one has progression separate from the other. Banks are separate, etc. So I imagine this feature would also be separate between them all, including when you start a new season, you're probably gonna have to beat through the campaign once. We will see, though. I have not seen a confirmation on that, but you could skip the campaign after you've beaten the campaign once, at least on your kind of group of characters that you want to use. On top of that, just for all of the sort of more skeptical, hating type people about the pay-to-win aspect of Diablo 4, there is a direct confirmation here. I'll bet this is a paid feature like Destiny 2, and Adam Fletcher responds, it is not. So definitely going to be a earned feature that you can use anytime. And honestly, I'm glad that they said something about this, because I know some people are going to really be skeptical about this. In my opinion, or at least my thought initially, was there's no way there's going to be a paid feature, and it would be correct. It is not a paid feature. I think if it was, I would consider that definitely pay to win, because that's definitely changing your gameplay experience between alternate characters, right? So that's huge news. Again, going to have to beat the campaign first, but after you've done it, you're going to go ahead and be able to make alts without beating the campaign at all, and you're going to be able to get access to the World Tier 3 without beating the campaign, which is huge. This is massive news. And I want to just reiterate something that I said earlier, and a comment on Twitter I saw from DatMods here. New Diablo 4 video just dropped, and there's a skip campaign button that was showcased. Thank you for respecting my time. This is a big thing I think a lot of gamers kind of relate to, which is that there's a respect for your time. If you don't have the respect, you feel a lot worse playing a game. Now, this respect can become, I guess, introduced in various different ways, either saving you time, giving you more rewards, having a better experience, improving quality of life. There's so many different things that you could feel like the game respects your time and that it's worth your time. Now, some people might say, oh, it's a game, nothing's worth your time. No, you can not respect your time, you're just there to have fun. But I would say it's kind of hard to describe. I do think there's a aspect of sort of being able to convey certain value to your players in how you develop the game, and that value conveying really gets received by your players and affects your enjoyment of the game. Again, I'm not the best to articulate this, but I do think that there is some sort of perceived value between the developers and the players, and I think this is a perfect example of how we feel like we are important to them. And I absolutely love this. This is huge. I would never have expected something like this ever when I first started covering Diablo 4. That's not the only thing I want to talk about today, though, even though it is the best news I've heard probably the entire time I've been covering the game over the past month. The other thing I want to talk about is a little bit of class balance. Now, this comes from Garan here, who, for those of you that don't know, he's actually part of the class design team. He's a class designer, and so he has a lot of information about sort of that aspect of the game. And this is a conversation between Ventilator and him. First thing they ask is, lots of the sorcerer cold spells reference frozen/chill, but you can't freeze/chill bosses, etc. This is pretty concerning, particularly for talents like snap freeze. And they show a bunch of screenshots of different abilities in the game. And then Lucaran responds, pros and cons to every build, pros and cons. And I think most people understand this. And then he goes on to say, to clarify, it's perfectly fine for a build to say, suck at bosses, but be amazing at clearing normal monsters, and vice versa. If a build is bad at everything, then that's when we need to step in. So this actually may give us some insight into how they're planning on balancing the druid, because they obviously know way more about us than we do, because, well, we haven't really tested the middle game, the end game, a lot of the content in the game, all the aspects of the game, right? There's a lot of things we haven't seen yet. And so they may know something like, hey, yeah, the early game may be bad, but I know that the end game is going to be super strong. Or potentially Druid sucks at clearing normal monsters, but they're really good at boss clearing, at least from what I found, right? And that's an important thing to note in terms of how their design philosophy kind of comes out. Every game has a certain design philosophy. For example, I know that in Guild Wars 2, one of the design philosophies is that an experienced player is going to do roughly 10 times the amount of damage than a regular player. This was their initial design philosophy, and they kind of rolled that back a little bit because it was too aggressive. But my point is, every game is going to have a specific kind of method, and their method is that we want specialized builds potentially, and it's okay to have specialized builds, sort of like Rift RGKs in Diablo 3, like Rift Guardian killers, as well as, you know, support builds, etc. They're going to have specific pathways that you can go through, and you got to make sure that if you're playing solo, you might want an all-rounder build, or something that may really heavily focus in on one aspect and then just put sigils in that kind of boost up that aspect so you don't have to fight a ton of bosses, etc. I think this is actually really interesting to talk about, and I'm very excited to see what they have planned for us. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about skip campaign button, guys. That is insane. I cannot believe that's in the game. I would never have expected that. I expected to repeat the campaign on every character, every season, all the time. So super excited about that. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll see you all tomorrow.